Hey guys, it's Fred. This is going to be part 2 of the interview that a fella did with Shirley Jean Hatfield. And Shirley Jean was the wife of Henry D. Hatfield, Tennis Hatfield's Henry D. Not Bad Elias. Now, Bad Elias had a Henry D. Hatfield also. Good Elias. Bad Elias was over in Kentucky. That was Preacher Ance's brother, son of George Hatfield. Good Elias was Big Eve's son. That was Devil Ance's brother. Good Elias had a son named Henry D. also. He became the governor, was a senator in West Virginia. So we're going to continue on here with Jean Hatfield's interview with this fella. Did he marry Nancy McCoy? She's talking about Frank Phillips. She was Johnson's first wife. See, she left Johnson for Frank Phillips. Well, now, Asa Harmon was her father. This is Jean talking. And he was the one Grandpa wounded him in the Civil War. No, that's not true. He never wounded Asa Harmon in the Civil War. He actually killed Asa Harmon after he was discharged. He'd been shot and was discharged and sent home. So the war for him was over. He actually killed a civilian, and he assassinated him while he was hiding in a cave to try to stay away from his family so they didn't burn the cabin down or reap havoc on his family. He stayed up in a cave hiding out till he mended. Grandpa wounded him in the Civil War, and when they all come back from the Civil War, he was found dead in Hatfield territory, and they blamed the Hatfields for the killing. But I think years later on, they found out that one of his own people had killed him and just thrown him into the Hatfield territory. You know, there's only 2 books written back then by people that was actually there, and that was T.C. Crawford, Vengeance, American Vendetta, and Sam McCoy. Sam McCoy wrote a memoir for his book. Sam McCoy went and seen Patsy the next day, and Patsy told him, said Jim Vance and Devil Ance and a bunch of men come calling for Asa Harmon. They killed him. But see, if you can make it look like, no matter how it's ever been, but you got to understand now, this is a Hatfield. She's married into the Hatfield family, and she's taken up for her Hatfield name, Hatfield husband, Hatfield ancestors. But now it was his daughter that married Johnsy. And from what I can understand, she made Johnsy live pretty rough, which he probably deserved for treating Rosanna the way he did. But now I talked to Aunt Betty and Aunt Rosie, both about Rosanna, and they were living at the house with her, and they loved her. See, everybody loved Rosanna from the way, that's why we got a little bit upset, my brother and I, years ago, when they had Rosanna been portrayed as a wild thing. That's never been in none of the family history. But in the play that they were putting on in Pike County, in order to rivet up, make it more interesting, I guess, they had Rosanna cussing and drinking moonshine and carrying on. That just wasn't according to anybody in the family. This is Hatfield's. They're even saying that. They said she was a beautiful person. She had coal black hair, and she had a good turn. She was just a nice person. And I think they kind of got mad at Johnson because he was running around and chasing women and things like that. See, guys, I don't think he was. Don't matter what I think. It's what we can prove. But proof's in the pudding. He took her to live with him over in West Virginia. It wasn't until Levice and Devil Ance kicked her out and she had to return home that they split up. They didn't split up. You've never heard a story where Rosanna and Johnsy split up because she found him with another woman. Never been a story like that. Now, after they split up, and then the brothers was taking him to jail and all this and that, his dad told him, stay away from her. She's going to get you killed. Then he went on to Nancy. But up to that point, him and Rosanna, there was no mention of another woman till they had split up. Now I've heard that Devil Anse wouldn't allow them to be married. That's what this fella asked. That's his question. And Gene Hatfield says he wouldn't. But years later, he said he wished he had have, because Rosanna saved Johnson's life a couple of times. That is true. And he did say that he wished he had let them marry. This is Gene talking. But back at that time, there was so much hatred going on between the families. Her father, as far as I know, never spoke to her again, just because she did take up with Johnson. Well, we know that's not the truth. We know that Rosanna went to live with her dad and mother. After the cabin was burnt down, she cared for her mother until her mother passed away in Pikeville. She actually lived at the house that Randall purchased there in Pikeville. That is now a restaurant. You know, she died. Randall McCoy and Rosanna buried her mother. And beside of her mother, Rosanna is buried. Randall McCoy outlived them both. If he never spoke to his daughter again, if he didn't love his daughter, why would he bury his daughter next to where he was going to be buried, beside him and Sarah? Some things you just have to look at, guys, and use common sense. I wasn't there. Don't know. But common sense tells me that she come to take care and care for her mother. The family knows that we know that happened. Did he kick her out after that? No, she lived right there till she died. And then he buried her beside of where he was going to be buried, and Sarah, there in Pikeville. What about the shirt Ellison wore when he was stabbed? As far as I know, it's in a museum in New Orleans. There's a picture there. Uncle Joe had it, and he sold it to one of the sister's grandsons. And he passed away, and the wife had it. I heard that it was on display in a museum. Henry tried to buy it back after his cousin died, but we never did get an answer back from them. I would still like to have it. Actually, it belonged to Henry's father, and he left it in storage at Uncle Joe's, and Uncle Joe sold it. It should have come down to Henry or Jack, but that's life. And see, that's correct. Jack and Henry were brothers. That's Tennis's sons, and both of them were collectors. Both of them were collectors. Jack, handsome Jack Hatfield, was the father to Stephen Hatfield. And handsome Jack and Henry were both there, according to the stories, when Tennis set fire to the house. He had his boys helping to carry items, guns, cabinets, anything of any value that he could sell or use. They carried it out of the house before the house was set on fire. Part 3. What about Devil Anse's politics? Well, Henry's father, Tennis, changed. Grandpa, talking about Devil Anse, was a Democrat. The way I can understand it, the Democrat Party was so closed that they wouldn't let Tennis in when he ran for sheriff. So he had to run his Republican ticket and won. Surprised the heck out of them, I imagine. And then Joe carried on as a Republican. But my husband was a Republican until he died. Me, I vote for the person. Both sides. Depends on the person that's running. Once you're out of favor, you live a pretty rough life. And that happened in our family too. Kind of wild back in those days, even back in the 30s and 40s. It was wild. think we're about to get civilized, Jean said. What about Dyke Garrett? This gentleman asked her. Uncle Dyke, he was with the family most of the time, off and on. He done the burying and the marrying. Of course, the picture back there shows him baptizing Grandpa. He was the circuit preacher. He traveled everywhere. Have you read John Ed Pierce's book about the feud in Eastern Kentucky? I think he was unfair to Devil Anse. That's what this fellow says. This is supposed to be a historian. This is supposed to be a person, but he says, I think he was unfair to Devil Anse. Because, see, they had called Devil Anse a deserter. They'd called Devil Anse a murderer. They'd called Devil Anse a thief. Well, maybe he had ties to the McCoys or something, she said. I think Cap and Jim Vance are the two who were the instigators. Now, this is the fellow talking. He's telling her, he's telling her how he feels. I think Cap and Uncle Jim Vance are the two who were the instigators. And she says, Devil Anse, he really didn't. He wasn't the major thing. If you notice, all the incidents that happened, it wasn't there. But Uncle Jim and Cap were. So I think they kind of pushed it, and Frank Phillips pushed it on the other side. Now, a while ago, she was blaming Perry Klein. Now she's blaming Frank Phillips. Was the type of man who would kill you for 50-cent bounty. He was a bounty hunter. Back at that time, $5 was a big bounty. They had a $500 bounty on Grandpa and Johnson's head in 1887. Usually, like Jesse James and them, theirs didn't go over $100. You know, we've got the warrant over there. The original, only copy of the warrant that's ever been found, and Stephen Hatfield had it. Now, Stephen Hatfield was the son of Handsome Jack Hatfield, and Handsome Jack would have gotten it from his father, Tennis Hatfield, before he burnt the house down. That would have been one of the items that he had gotten out of that house instead of burning it up. And that was the only copy, and still the only copy today. Was that in Kentucky? I'm hoping someone will link all these historical sites together, she says. She was trying to promote her little museum, rightly so, and she was hoping that it would build up. I was told that Cap Hatfield Cemetery is not supposed to be visited. Is that true? He's asking her. I don't know. Neighborhood people go up in there, so I don't really know. How would you describe his set of the family? And Jean says, they were more private people. They didn't mix with the public like Henry's father, Tennis, was always in the public. So I think it just come naturally for his children to be that way. You know, guys, she says Cap Hatfield didn't mix, but yet he was a deputy sheriff. He was under Joe and Tennis. We know it's false, so don't mistake what I'm going to say, but we thought he was this big lawyer. If he's a big lawyer, where's all his clients? Where's all of his legal work? Where's his law firm? This is Jean Hatfield talking. She's there. She lived there. So not all of Devil Anse's brothers were involved in the feud. Well, now, like Wall Hatfield, he wasn't concerned in it. Nowhere. And they took him before a jury and found him guilty of murder, which he didn't do. And he died in the pen just not long after he got there because he just couldn't handle penitentiary life. And he's buried down under that highway. The highway went over the graves of the prisoners that were buried there. Isn't that terrible? She says. See, Sheila and I did a video in Frankfort from the Kentucky State Penitentiary where it was. and the parking lot where he's buried at, somewhere in that parking lot. Devil Anse loved his family. He wanted to kill them 3 boys over Ellison, but he wanted to go retrieve his own brother's body, Walt Hatfield, from the prison and give him a proper burial or send somebody to get it. He didn't try to rescue Cotton Top Hatfield, Ellison's son. Where did they bury Ellison Mounts? See how they call them Mounts? He's not a Mount. Cotton Top was a Hatfield through and through. He's a Hatfield. Ellison, Cotton Top, Hatfield. His mother married a Mounts years later, but he was the son of Ellison Hatfield and Harriet Hatfield, his first cousin. Harriet was the daughter of John Hatfield. Harriet's brother was actually Hog Stillin' Floyd. Hog Stillin' Floyd's father was John Hatfield. Where did they bury Ellison Mounts? I think he's buried over at the Hatfield Cemetery at Matewan. That's where Grandma and Grandpa's mother and father is buried. Ephraim, he's buried there. See how we just talk things into history? I think he's buried over at the Hatfield Cemetery at Matewan. Just guesswork. But then somebody writes it or types it, and you believe that. Ellison is buried at the Pikeville Cemetery above where he was hung at, way back up there in the woodline. Unmarked grave, but that's where he's buried. But she says here, I think he's buried at Matewan at the Hatfield Cemetery. She's talking about the Ellison Hatfield Cemetery there at Red Jacket. Are they marked? Yeah. Yeah, I think they have a small marker. Devil Anse's father was Big Eve and his mother was Nancy. That's where Uncle Jim come in at. That was her brother. Who had the home when it burned? Tennis. He inherited it from his mama. It burned after she passed. That was on the land that he inherited. All of the children got a certain amount of land. But see, he was the baby boy, and back in those days, your baby boy got the home place. Just the way it worked. Why was Cap's family not buried with the other Hatfields? Cap and Grandpa and the boys seemed like there was a riff all the time. He was at Grandpa's funeral, but they hadn't had much dealings from what I can understand. So when he died, he just wanted to be buried on his own land. They started their own little cemetery down there. They may have had some people die before that buried them there. See, guys, when Cap was, we done a video on it. Go look for little Captain, little Shep Hatfield. When Cap was out west on the run, him and Johnson, Cap's son, Captain Shepherd Hatfield, died. Captain, that was his name, Captain Shepherd Hatfield. They called him Little Cap. Through the years, you'll hear people say Cap was known as Little Cap. No, Cap was known as Cap because he had a cap on his eye. Little Captain, that was his name. He died of malnutrition. He died of starvation, according to Coleman C. Hatfield's book, page 258, I think. Cap come home. When he comes home, he finds out his son has starved to death. He died. Now, Devil Anse, he's buried up on Devil Anse's cemetery. Buried just off to the right and in front of Devil Anse's big monument. A little bitty small tombstone with a little sheep, a lamb on it. Captain Shepherd Hatfield. So, that's why Cap was buried on his own cemetery. That's why Cap wasn't buried with his family. That's why Cap didn't get along with his father. He started to resent his father in years later because his father made him helped kill the 3 McCoy boys, stand on line at 18 years old and shoot three other fellas. All the things that he did, and then he lets his son starve to death. Devil Anse was doing good at that time. He had timber business. He could have sent some victuals down the road to Cap's family. He felt hard at Cap because Jim Vance had been killed. That was his #1 protector. #2 protector was Cap. Cap's took off running. He's gone out west. He felt hard at him because he left him. He wasn't going to take care of his family. If he wants to take care of his family, let him do it. Cap resented him for that. They didn't get along. Chauncey's buried up there too. Any of his wives buried with him? This fella asked Gene. Gene says, no. That's sad that he had so many wives and none are buried with him. Yeah, that's a lesson to those men. You better find you one good loyal one and stick with them. Gene died in 2011. You know, guys, and we've done video on it, but interesting that Chauncey Hatfield was married 4 times, 4 different women. He's buried beside his mother and father by himself. Rosanna McCoy had one lover in her whole life, Chauncey Hatfield. Head over heels in love. She's buried beside her mother and father in Pikeville by herself. Now, some people says, oh, Chauncey run around, Chauncey done this, Chauncey done that. Chauncey didn't do that when he was with her. The only thing that broke them up was the 2 families couldn't get along, and they was afraid that Chauncey was going to get killed trying to get back and forth to see her, or her sneaking out to see him. Those 2 loved each other. There was no cheating, not while they were together, or if there was, there's never been a tale of it. That's not even been written into history or spoken into history in a book. It's not out there. It wasn't until later on that they split up, and then he went on and started dating and married Nancy Hatfield. It's going to conclude this part, guys. That is the interview with Shirley Jane Hatfield. And interesting story. But if you'll look through it, there's a lot more to it. I didn't go over the whole story. But if you'll read the whole interview, you'll see all kinds of discrepancies where she was speaking stuff into history, or she was telling things that she had been told with no documentation, no proof, nothing more than somebody else had told her what somebody else had told them, and so forth on back through the line. Thanks for joining me. Catch you next time.